One of 7 children, Henry spent afternoons hitting bottle caps with sticks in his Tolmanville, Alabama neighborhood. At age 14, he set his sights on the major leagues after hearing a speech by his baseball hero, Jackie Robinson, the first African American to play in the majors. Aaron's baseball career began in 1951 with the Mobile Black Bears, a semi-pro team. In 1952, he was recruited to play for the Indianapolis Clowns, a Negro American League team. After only 3 months with the Clowns, he had offers from both the New York Giants and the Boston Braves. Aaron signed with the Braves for $10,000 and was sent to the Eau Claire Bears, the Braves' Northern League team. He was selected to play in the 1952 Northern League All-Star Game and was named Rookie of the Year. By the spring of 1953, Aaron was promoted to the Jacksonville Braves and became the league MVP, helping the team win the championship. Although Aaron was an outstanding player, the shadow of racism hung over him, and the Jim Crow laws of the South forced him to find separate meals and lodging when traveling with his white teammates. His major league debut finally arrived in April of 1954, when he filled in for injured Milwaukee Braves left fielder Bobby Thompson. Aaron would not relinquish his position in the lineup for the next 21 years, and the following season he was selected to his first of 25 total All-Star teams. 1957 was a memorable year for both Aaron and the Braves when they won the National League pennant on Aaron's 11th inning walk-off homer. He then led the Braves to their first World Series title in 43 years and was named National League MVP. When the Braves moved to Atlanta in 1966, Aaron led the league in home runs. And in 1969, he helped the team win the Western Division Championship. Hank's younger brother Tommy also played for the Braves at that time. Together, they set another record, the most combined home runs by siblings, 768. In May of 1970, Aaron got his 3,000th hit, and talk began about him breaking Babe Ruth's 714 home run record. The chase, as it was known, began, and at the end of the 1973 season, Aaron was just 1 home run shy of tying the record. With a media frenzy surrounding him and a shocking amount of racially charged insults and even death threats, Aaron continued his chase. On April 8, 1974, in front of a record crowd in Atlanta, Hank Aaron etched his name into baseball history.
It's gone! It's 7:15! There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron!
He broke Babe Ruth's record with a drive into left center field off Dodger pitcher Al Downing. It was an incredible moment in baseball, and for Aaron, a welcome relief.
And I just thank God it's all over with. Thank you very much.
At the end of the 1974 season, Aaron hit his 733rd and final home run as a Brave before heading to the Milwaukee Brewers to end his career. After retiring, Aaron served as Vice President of Player Development, and in 1989, the Atlanta Braves named him Senior Vice President of the club. He also became a successful entrepreneur and created a lasting legacy with his Chasing the Dream Foundation. Hank Aaron, Home Run King.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our Master of Ceremonies for the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Awards presentation, Mrs. Billy Aaron.
Thank you so very, very much. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Atlanta Braves and the Center for Civil and Human Rights welcome you to the 5th annual Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Awards ceremony. This ceremony is being presented by Delta Airlines. For many of you, my husband Hank Aaron is known as Homerun Hank, the home run king. But many don't know Henry the man, certainly not as I know Henry the man, the father, the husband. He has been a beacon of light within this community and has served as an advocate for social change and human rights. Being a young man from Mobile, Alabama, who transitioned from the Negro League to the major leagues while overcoming some of the harshest treatment of African Americans during the racially charged 1950s and the 1960s, I should say, Hank was able to persevere. Not only through his tumultuous journey did he break Babe Ruth's home run record, but by the time of his retirement, he was Major League Baseball's leader in runs batted in extra base hits, and total bases. Yet, his greatest feat may be leveraging his on-field accolades as a platform to help empower and advance social, civil, and human rights. Whether it is through continuous philanthropic efforts working as a front office baseball executive or being a successful entrepreneur and businessman, I have seen Henry measure each step by step, ensuring his impact on this community, on this country, and indeed on the world for the betterment of social change. Each year during Hank Aaron Heritage Weekend, the Atlanta Braves honor Henry's on and off-field accomplishments while saluting individuals that have positively affected the advancement of social and human rights within their communities. So today is very special. Today, we recognize and celebrate 4 individuals who in their own way stayed the course in the quest for equality and civil rights, not just for themselves, but for all humanity. I can't think of a more appropriate place to have such an event as this than right here in this beautiful building. It serves as a destination for anyone wishing to learn and experience the challenges and triumphs of civil and human rights in our history. I would like for you to hear now from someone who knows far more about this building than I. So I'd like to ask Mr. Derek Kayungo. Did I get that right, Derek? Yes, you did. Kayungo. Mr. Kayungo, would you please come to the stage?
Good afternoon, everyone. What a delight to see so many lovely faces and so many encouraging smiles. To the Braves, you are really brave, and we are proud of you. To Baba Aaron, we are so glad to have you here and to have such a lovely mama back here. A beautiful lady. Can you give her a big round of applause for? Because we know that behind every successful man is what? A successful, great woman. On behalf of the board of the Center for Civil and Human Rights, on behalf of our staff, but most important of all, on behalf of all of us as Americans, especially at this time and hour, what a great place to be this afternoon at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. And so I urge you today that as you go through this whole week, you think about us and our place here for you. We're here to really ground you in understanding the power of the work that was done by people in this building, the kings of this world, and indeed all of our forefathers. So thank you so much for being here, and we hope you keep on supporting us and keep on loving us and keep looking beautiful. Thank you.
Not only has the city of Atlanta become a place to foster the education and implementation of civil and human rights, it is the home of America's team. You can't live in Atlanta and not know that you are living in the city where America's team became a reality in 1966, I believe. That's not on my script, so I'm guessing here. As our country has fought for freedom and trudged through conflict, baseball has been a leading catalyst in encouraging community and equality. The Atlanta Braves proudly support the efforts of furthering the mission to teach generations yet unborn the value of equality, justice, and freedom for all people. At this time, it is my honor to introduce the Atlanta Braves President of Business, Mr. Derek Sheila. Mr. Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Derek, for allowing us to use your great facility for this forum. It's an absolute delight each year that we get to do this. I'm going to be, on behalf of the Braves, officially welcoming you to the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Awards ceremony. I'd like to thank you all for coming, but in particular, Hank, I'd like to thank you and recognize you for all you've done for the Atlanta Braves, for the game of baseball, and as your wife notably said, deservingly so, for Atlanta and really the world. So thank you for being here. Let's give one more round of applause. You know, this event would not also be possible if not for our supporters, and in particular, I'd like to point out one of them, who's brought this great weekend to fruition. I'd like to thank Delta Airlines for their partnership this weekend. They've done a terrific job each and every year. Thank you. If you see all of the Delta Airlines folks in their red coats and captain's uniforms, we thank you guys for locking arm in arm with us and your support. Let's hear it for Delta Airlines as well. And this weekend took a lot of hard work by a lot of different people. I could not certainly name them all, but a few just names that I'd like for everybody to know is Erica Newsom and her entire team of support, Jim Williams, who's done a great job of helping to organize all this, as well as Adrian Williams. So thank you to all of you as well. You know, before we begin to honor these four deserving individuals, I believe it's important to recognize our timing for these awards. Certainly, the roundtable discussion and probably the discussions that is about to ensue in the wake of the events of Charlottesville. Everyone in this room can certainly agree that the hatred and violence was not and is not acceptable. But we can all be part of that solution. On behalf of the Atlanta Braves, I'm proud that we have a forum to come together for meaningful, thoughtful, and peaceful discussion on inclusiveness and tolerance. These discussions must continue, and they must continue to occur in places like this, and the Braves will continue to be a leader in this effort. For background, we began these weekends in 2011 with the hosting of MLB's Civil Rights Game. It was an opportunity that the league anointed to the Braves, and it gave us an opportunity to really recognize what these kinds of events can do. But after hosting the event, we felt it was important to continue our efforts. And so while the MLB Civil Rights Game moved on to other cities, we decided that we wanted to have an annual event. And we believe that this event continues to shine a light on not only what has done in the past with the world of sports and baseball, but also how we move forward with a message of inclusion and tolerance. We must continue to speak up and denounce those that spew hatred in our society and their acts of violence because of one's color, race, religion, or sexuality. There is no place in it in our communities. Atlanta is a very special place. We're proud to play here. We're proud to represent this great community. It has seen, unfortunately, its share of racial intolerance. But it has also been a community where people like you come together and understand how we can have discussions like this and celebrate diversity. So today is another day where we're doing just that. We're proud to be a small part of that. So the Atlanta Braves wish to thank and support, as part of this day, Cito Gaston, Alexis Herman, Roland Martin, and Hank Thomas for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, and enjoy the day.
Thank you. Before we go on, I'd like to recognize a special guest in the audience, a former recipient of the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award, who's here today. He has served baseball for over 50 years, is the first general manager to win a world championship in both leagues, led the Atlanta Braves to 14 consecutive division titles, and is the newest member of the exclusive club located in Cooperstown. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating the Vice Chairman of the Atlanta Braves on his well-deserved induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame, Mr. John Shoho. Thank you, thank you. It is now time to introduce and honor each of our distinguished recipients with the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award, and then learn from their insights and experiences in an illuminating round table discussion. The Champion of Justice Award recognizes and honors individuals that have made lifelong commitments to overcome obstacles and inspire others for the benefit of social, human, and civil rights. In the community, in the business world, in education, and of course, in philanthropy and sports. Presenting the awards on behalf of the Atlanta Braves is another member of the Atlanta Braves leadership team who has made a huge positive impact in our community, in many ways, including spearheading the construction of the brand new, shiny SunTrust Park and the Battery Atlanta. Please join me in welcoming the Atlanta Braves President of Development, Mr. Mike Plant. And now, where is the script? Anyway, it's time now for the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award winners. And I believe, Mr. Plant, you can take your seat until I'm ready for you the next go round. I believe that's what we are doing. Is that what we are doing? Okay, stand here, remain here. Somebody else to call. Okay. According to my script, ladies and gentlemen, our first Champion for Justice Award recipient has been a trailblazer throughout her entire life. Born and raised in Mobile, Alabama, she graduated from Xavier University of Louisiana with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. She began her career in human rights by advocating for minority women employment while working with Catholic charities and other agencies. She met Jimmy Carter while campaigning in Atlanta and was selected for his presidential staff in 1977. At age 29, she was the youngest person to ever serve as the director of Labor Department's Women's Bureau. After aiding in the White House for a term, she founded and served as president of her own consulting firm while remaining involved in politics. She became the chief of staff and later vice chair of the Democratic National Committee and organized the 1992 Democratic National Convention at Madison Square Garden. After President Clinton's victory in 1992, he appointed her as the deputy director of the Presidential Transition Office and then to head the White House Office of Public Liaison. During President Clinton's second term, she took on the title Secretary of Labor and became the first African American nominated for the role and only the fifth woman appointed. She now serves as the co-chairperson of the Democratic National Committee's Rules and Bylaws Committee, as well as serving on the boards of several major companies, including Atlanta's own Coca-Cola Company, Toyota, and MGM Resorts, among others, of course. She is also the chairman and CEO of New Ventures Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, our first Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award recipient is the Honorable Alexis Herman. Thank you, Ms. Herman. Now I know why you're standing there, Ms. Planet. Now I get it. A little late, but I get it. Okay, our next Champion for Justice Award recipient took to the baseball field in the fight for human rights. Selected by the Atlanta Braves in 1967, he played primarily in center field for the next decade with the Braves, the Padres, and the Pirates. A fellow teammate and roommate of Hank Aaron, he was quoted saying that Aaron taught him how to be a man, how to stand on your own. And in 1970, he earned a spot on the National League All-Star team. Following his playing career, he was hired as the hitting coach for the Toronto Blue Jays in 1982, where he served for 8 years. When the opportunity to manage the Blue Jays opened in 1989, he was encouraged by his own players to accept the role. As manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, he turned the team from a losing season team to division winners in 1989, 1991, 92, and 93. A player's manager, he was described as treating everyone like a human being, and his players were quoted saying, "We'd go to war for Cito." In 1992, he became the first African-American manager to win a World Series championship. That deserves an applause right in the middle of this. He continued his legacy by leading the Toronto Blue Jays in another World Series win the following year and managed both the 1992 and the 1993 American League All-Star teams. With a decade as a player and another 12 years as manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, he took tremendous steps in breaking the color barrier on and off the field. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award recipient, Mr. Clarence Cito Jackson. A journalist, a columnist, commentator, and author. Our next recipient is a strong voice for African Americans and other minority groups in the media. A descendant of Haitian immigrants, he was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I claim a little ownership to Houston. A descendant, I said that. He pursued a master's degree after receiving a bachelor's degree in journalism from Texas A&M. He received his master's degree in Christian communications from Louisiana Baptist University before joining the BET Sunday morning news program called Lead Story as a contributor. In his early career, he became the executive editor of the Chicago Defender, hosted a morning radio talk show out of Chicago, and was a CNN contributor for 7 years. In 2013, he began hosting TV One's first one-hour live weekday morning news program called News One Now. The program delivers information for and about Blacks in America by sharing stories, offering diverse opinions, and distributing news across many mediums. Their mission is to embrace and positively impact the lives of African Americans. He continues to uplift and empower his community through News One Now and hosting his own radio show. Ladies and gentlemen, our next Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award recipient is none other than Mr. Roland Martin. An original freedom rider. This Hank Aaron Champion of Justice Award recipient began the fight against racial injustice at an early age. A self-proclaimed rebel, he participated in sit-ins, occupied designated white seats on the bus, and would bring his own books to the local library to read when he was refused the right to check out their books. Quite a man. While in college at Howard University in Washington, D.C., he helped create and establish the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. On May 4, 1961, he was one of 13 African American and white civil rights activists to jump on a bus and become the original Freedom Riders. They were the first to travel on Greyhound and Trailways buses through the South, protesting and holding demonstrations along the way. 10 days into the journey near Anniston, Alabama, their bus was set on fire, and the Freedom Riders were attacked and beaten by armed men as they tried to escape the blaze. Once they escaped the violent outbreak, our recipient was taken to the hospital but received no medical care. Although shaken, he continued to fight the good fight by joining a second freedom ride just 10 days later. For this act of courage, he was incarcerated and only released on bail. After his freedom rides and following the Vietnam War, he moved to Atlanta and became an entrepreneur by partnering with a friend to open a laundromat. He mastered the franchise business and throughout his career has owned a Burger King, 2 Dairy Queens, 6 McDonald's restaurants, and now a string of hotels. He currently owns 4 Marriotts, 2 Fairfield Inns, and 2 Town Place Suites. He was inducted into the International Civil Rights Walk of Fame, received the For My People Award, and won the 365 Black Award given by McDonald's Incorporated. A lifetime member of the NAACP and the last original Freedom Rider, he continues to fight against injustice and our human rights to this day. My friends, all ladies and gentlemen, our final Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award is another Henry, Mr. Henry Hank Thomas. We are indeed honored by their presence here today. And we are honored to have a distinguished member of our community that many of you may know very well from his work right here with the center. He was the founding CEO of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights and oversaw the formative stages of the center where we stand or sit today, that serves to educate visitors on the global struggle for civil and human rights, both from our past and in our present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the young man whom you will hear next, speaking for the panel and to the panel, the Chief Executive Officer of the Woodward Art Center, Mr. Doug Shipman.
Thank you all. Congratulations to each of you. It is very nice to be back in this seat. I think I've been in this seat 5 or 6 years since we started this with the Civil Rights Game. It's always a pleasure to bring together this group of awardees, always a diverse group from various backgrounds, to talk about sports, their own lives, tell some stories, and share some advice. So it is a pleasure to be here today and to be back at the Center for Civil and Human Rights and with the Atlanta Braves. Thank you for this event. So we have a very interesting group because we have corporate, government, athletic, activists, journalists, perspectives all on the same panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by asking a few questions to each of the individuals so you get a bit of a sense of who they are and where they've come from and their perspectives, and then we're going to have a little bit of dialogue across everybody. So I'm actually going to start at the far left. Alexis, with you. You have moved in so many different circles over your life. Corporations, governments, nonprofits, activism, et cetera. And you've also gotten a sense to see how those different entities think about decisions, how they make decisions, especially around things like endorsements and such. I just wonder if you give us a bit of a perspective. How have things changed when it comes to the way that companies especially, but also governments and nonprofits engage social issues over the course of your leadership? How has that sort of evolved over time?
I think it has really changed, and I think it's changed primarily in a couple of ways. I think in the beginning there was not the connections, if you will, between these various sectors that you see today. I also don't think that the values really drove corporate decisions in the same way that perhaps those of us who came from the nonprofit world or even government made those decisions. That's all changed. I think today, companies in particular, when you talk about the endorsement and the sports world, it really is about understanding now the values of customers, of the communities in which they live and work, and understanding that it is more than just the bottom line, and that it is all connected. And the best companies who really get it, I think, value reputational value as much as they do the profit motive, and understand it's no longer about just the bottom line, but it is about the triple bottom line. It's about the communities in which they work. It's still about shareholders, and it's also about their employees and their customers. So for me, good companies today, good organizations today, I'm not going to comment right now on government today, but it really is about...
I will.
I know you will, but I'm going to leave that space for him.
You're being generous.
Yeah, I'm being very generous because, I mean, we live increasingly today in a values-based society. And how we embrace values of inclusion, of fairness, how we make sure that we empower our people, especially companies with their employees, it's all changed. And I think for the better. And I'm hoping, and I'm going to defer to Roland and then I'll comment later, that we'll be able to get back to a national conversation and dialogue about who and what we really represent as a country today. And so for me, the big change, just the bottom line, the question, it really is about not just the profit motive anymore. It's a values-based conversation. and young people today especially, when you talk about millennials and the generation behind us, they want something very different today. And they want to see us live out those values of what this country was founded on. And I think in many ways that's why we see so much of the chaos that we have today.
And just as a follow-up for you, because you have moved in so many of these different circles, what have you taken from one to the other? So as somebody who's moved from nonprofit to government, from government to business, what have you tried to bring into those conversations, given that unique experience?
There's no substitute for individual leadership at a table in any room. You can't check your values, your history, and where you've come from at the door.
Right.
You have an obligation, a responsibility to recognize that really freedom really is a constant struggle. I don't care where you sit. And you have to always ask yourself, you know, are you doing your part in that room, at that table, to make sure that you're opening the doors even wider for others to come through? And whether that's, you know, what you do with a workforce, if you're in a boardroom, and how you look at inclusion, whether it's about how you help to create entrepreneurial opportunities to foster more business success, or whether it's just your own person speaking up when you see something is not right. And that's been my history, and I accept the fact now that, you know, part of the reason I'm in the room and at the table is that they know that, and that is the expectation, and I want that to be the expectation for me.
So, Cito Gaston, you've been in a different set of rooms. You've been in locker rooms, you've been on sports fields where people have watched your work, have cheered for you, have booed you. I've booed you as a Braves fan, sorry, at times. And there are others in the room, I won't call out names, but have been upset with you. What does it feel like in those rooms, especially around, I mean, do issues of social justice, do issues of politics come up in locker rooms? Is that something that players and managers talk about, or is that something that people kind of leave outside of the ballpark? I wonder what it's like in the sports setting.
Well, first of all, I expect to get booed tonight anyway, and that's okay. That's okay, because you're supposed to pull for your team. If you're for the Braves, you're supposed to pull for the Braves. And I expect that to happen tonight, but that's okay. But, you know, in all honesty, you don't hear a lot of politics talked in locker rooms like you do today. I mean, there's people making more statements than they did when I was playing. And probably because they were afraid to make those statements, because they were afraid to lose their jobs or lose their position. But now we have some kids now that are standing up for things that wasn't done that way in the past. And you know what? You can look at them this way or that way, but look at them and that's what they believe. And you shouldn't be punished for that's what you believe. You know, you should be looked at and said, well, I believe this way, he believes that way. And that's what makes the world, that we all don't believe in the same thing. But we can come together and try to get the same thing out of those beliefs. But in the locker rooms, guys don't talk politician no more. Like I said, when I played, when I managed, but I think there's more out there. It may be more so today than ever. Yeah.
And as you were playing, and then also especially as you were a trailblazer as a manager, did you think about that? Did you think about in that moment while you're trying to win a World Series, trying to win another game, trying to get your players, is it on your mind that there's something else going on and that there's another conversation going on, or do you only look back on that afterwards? Hank, I'm going to have a similar conversation. When you're going through these things, are you thinking about anything except what's in front of you?
No, you think about those things because they happen to you. You know, they happen to you. I'll give you a quick example. My last year I managed, which I came back to Toronto Blue Jays, and I was there from the middle of 2008 till 10. And my last weekend was in Minnesota. And maybe you guys don't know it, but Hank knows it, and he probably had one himself, being such a, this man is a superstar. I mean, you talk about baseball player, Hall of Famer, he's a superstar Hall of Famer. And managed to get sweet on the road. And usually you're on the concierge floor. So I'm in Minnesota, and I go out and for a little walk, because I'm too old to run anymore, so I go for a walk. Just trying to stay in shape a little bit, and I come back in, and there's a lady sitting at the desk. And let me remind you, you cannot get on this floor unless you have the right key. And I walked in, and I had shorts on, sneakers on, and t-shirt, and I wanted to walk into the room and pick up some water. And she says, "Excuse me." And I looked at her and I said, "What'd you do?" "What'd you do?" And she looked back at me and says, "Pretty much, what are you doing up here?" And first of all, I can't get up there if I don't have a key to get up there. Second of all, I think you can approach me in a different way. And I looked at her and I says, "Because I'm on this floor." She says to me, "Well, I didn't recognize you." "How would you recognize me? You don't know me." You don't know me. And you know, there's other things that happen as a manager. Sure, I thought of these things because I grew up, I'm just a few years younger than Hank. So I grew up, and I know some of the things he went through. I went through a lot of them too. So even managing and trying to do my job, I'm aware that things are still out there going on that shouldn't be going on. But we certainly have people, certainly like Mr. Thomas on that end there, that I hope you don't mind me telling this. I said he's a great hero. He's a hero of mine, and it took a lot of guts to go out there. He says, "Well, I was only 19."
Yeah.
I was only 19.
So just one more question on that, especially in some of the things as a player that you went through. How'd you keep going? I mean, how did you sort of endure those things and go out and, you know, play the game and play at a high level and keep yourself? What gave you the resilience?
Well, there was a few things. It's something I always wanted to do, and it's not too often in life that you can do. From being a little kid, I always wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And when I'm talking to kids to this day, I tell them you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it bad enough, if you want to work at it hard enough. But there was some help along the line. I mean, certainly my mom, who taught me when I first left home, she says, "Son, I know that a lot of times you might want to stand your ground, but sometimes you just gotta let it go because you don't have the power to stand your ground. And then sometimes you do. But I would rather see there you go than there you lie." And then also on the way up through this game, guys, and I'm not saying this because this man's in his room, but Hank Aaron, Mr. Aaron here, taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet. He taught me how to not take what happened yesterday into the next day. You know, if you had a bad day at the plate, you went 0 for 4, bring it to the ballpark the next day. You went 4 for 4, bring it to the ballpark the next day. You can't do that. You have to move on. And guys like Mr. Aaron, my mom, and the desire to play in the major leagues, and that's what I want to do. That's what I tell everyone. You can do anything you want to do if you really want to do it, and you really want to work at it. And it doesn't hurt to have a little talent, I guess, but anyway, that's how and the desire. You have to have the desire to keep going and put things behind you, and it's going to be a better day tomorrow, you know, and that's the way I look at it.
Thank you. Roland, high school baseball player. That's what we were talking about backstage.
Yep.
Journalist, activist, social media guru of all types. You have known a lot of public figures, personally, professionally, obviously. You've been around them for a long time. How has the way they've engaged social issues, in your opinion, changed? And I'm especially interested, because you're so deep in this space, from a social media perspective, how do you think that's changed the things that which public figures are interacting with issues?
Well, one is more immediate. So if you, I mean, I'm a student of history, and so if you study the various movements, if you study A. Philip Randolph in terms of how they were able to disseminate information, even going before him. I mean, this is the 190th anniversary of the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, which was founded in March 1827. And so when you look at Frederick Douglass at the North Star, look at Ida B. Wells Barnett, you look at in terms of those writings and how it was disseminated, then all of a sudden, which really were pamphlets and newspapers, right. And then of course, all of a sudden you now go through the period of Chicago Defender being founded in 1905 by Robert Abbott, and then of course, then you have the mediums of radio, and then of course you have television, and you have Ebony and Jet magazine comes along. Social media is a lot faster, it's much more immediate, but the reality is you still have to have something to say. So there are people who are saying stuff, but they're not saying anything. And so what is the level of context? What's the level of depth behind what you actually have to say? And so that's why, like, people hit me up, they say, hey, I want you to follow me. I go, but what do you talk about? See, and they say, well, I'm following you. I'm like, because I got something to say. And so, so you have to actually have to say something to me to have a level of impact. And there are a lot of people who want to just be famous or just be known. There are people who want to be on television. I mean, I'll have folks come up to me, and it's not necessarily people who are young. There are people who are in their 40s or their 50s, and they say, hey, man, I want to do this. And I go, okay, what do you have to say? Because if you're there, when you're on the television, you're on radio, what are you using it for? What are you saying? What are you doing? I know exactly what I'm trying to communicate when I'm talking to nearly 2 million people on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, when I'm on television, when I'm on radio. I understand that medium. I understand the power of it. And to put it in context, and I say this all the time in my speeches, if you study coups that take place around the world, they always get control of the military first. Media is always second. Mm-hmm. Not the banks, not the ports. It's always media. Because you understand how do people receive information. That right there tells you the power of information and how you use it. And so I tell people all the time, you must be very careful with how you use that platform, because people are listening. When folks, they say, man, you interrupt people on your show when they lie. I said, yeah, because I can't let you lie and then I say nothing, because if you're watching, you go, well, hell, Roland didn't say anything, right, so it must be true. Right. And so I'll say, no, hold on, I'm gonna let you finish, but you're not gonna lie. Mm-hmm. And so you're not gonna make stuff up in my presence. Which also requires that you got to have something in your head to know they lying. Well,
and this is the interesting thing, right? And you started your remarks here. Anybody who's watched you knows that you are a student of history and that you use history as a guide often.
Absolutely.
Where did that come from? Where did your love of history come from?
Well, growing up, I mean, look, my parents who are here, y'all stand up. Stand up. My parents didn't go to college. My parents graduated from high school, but there was a value of education. So I'll never forget how many people had the leather-bound volumes of Ebony magazine. Remember they put the history of Black America? Y'all know, I put that on Instagram one day, and it was crazy, the number of people who responded, who was like, yo, we had the same thing in our house. Mm. I swear every black household had that, mm-hmm, and those damn Britannica encyclopedias. And so we had that as well. And so, I mean, and I read them. I mean, so they weren't just sitting at home. As a kid, I read 300 books a summer. We would go to the library, and we had to check out the maximum number of books. Not the minimum number, the maximum number. And we went every week, which meant you had to read the maximum number of books every week. Mm. And so that was always the thing for me. And so even now, I read 7 to 9 books at one time. And I don't speed read. I got staffers who say, how the hell you remember all this stuff? I'm like, I have no idea, I just do. And so it's interesting because as we were sitting here, when you asked Alexis the question about social issues and corporate responsibility, this actually started with the Polaroid revolutionary workers in the movement in 1970. When you talk about wanting to honor somebody, you should honor Carolyn Hunter Williams, who's still with us. The reason apartheid was brought down to its knees because 2 black people, 2 black workers at Polaroid in 1970, discovered that Polaroid made the passbooks that black people had to show to prove their identification. Mm-hmm. Ken Williams started. Here's Carolyn Williams, recent college graduate, chemistry major. Her mom said, what the hell are you doing? You got a good job, and y'all trying to do this here? She said, but it's important. The apartheid divestment movement started with 2 black workers at Polaroid in 1970. The Congressional Black Caucus was not on the divestment plan before they were. When Mandela died, I had Ron Dellums on my show, and I had Carolyn on the show. Because the crazy thing is, I went to Martha's Vineyard a few years ago for an event an event there, and I happened to stay at their house. Now, I didn't know who she was.
Oh, interesting.
I had no idea. So I stayed at the house. I met a daughter, and I play in the golf tournament they have every year honoring Ken Williams. And so I'm in New York City one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm watching documentary. I watch all that sort of stuff, and I'm sitting there watching it. And then they showed his sister, and they talk about Carolyn Hunter, and I go. And then the guy Ken Williams, but I know she's Carolyn Hunter Williams, and so I text the daughter, is this your mama? And she goes, yeah. And I go, what? I said, hold up. Again, I had no idea. So I knew the story, but that's literally how the movement started. And so to that point, that movement is the reason why, and then you have all the black employee groups now in these companies. So the employees have forced companies to say, you're not just going to make money, you now have to have a level of social involvement for the customer. And that's why McDonald's and Coca-Cola, and that's why Xerox, you go down the line, it's because of that. But it was those 2 black workers at Polaroid that actually kicked that whole thing off. And we don't talk about them a lot. When Mandela died, I told Carolyn, I'm gonna put you on TV because people need to know what y'all did. Apartheid does not come tumbling down without the Polaroid workers and those 2 African Americans. That's what happens when you read.
There you go. I mean, obviously, you got a lot of allies in that thought process sitting in a museum like this is, obviously. So one other thing about history, when you think about, obviously from a baseball perspective, Mr. Aaron is here, Jackie Robinson's legacy, baseball has played such an integral role in societal change. If you look at today and compare it to history, do you think sports is playing the role it should be playing right now?
Sports can't play the role unless the people in sports assume the role. So it's not the role that sports plays. Who's actually playing sports? What is the level of consciousness of individuals who are actually playing the game? If you don't bring the consciousness to the table, nothing is actually going to happen. One of the reasons, as Cito said, one of the reasons you see more players speaking out because the money has changed. Money also brings freedom. When your checkbook can be controlled, then your mouth and your mind can be controlled. And I don't care what that is. I mean, Cito and I were talking backstage, and I spent 6 years at CNN, and the way I operate, I'm not going to be. There are 2 things for me. You can be present, or you can have presence. I'm not trying to be present. You're going to feel my presence, even if you don't like it. When I did the Monique show a few years ago on BET, she said, Roland, you say stuff on TV, I'm afraid you're going to get fired. I said, well, first of all, I start every job with the premise I'm going to get fired anyway. I mean, 3 things are going to happen. You're going to get fired, leave, or you're going to stay. All right. So I just don't believe being there and saying nothing and doing nothing. And so, but remember, I can't do that unless that has been built up in me. It's been molded and shaped growing up. Look, my parents started, they were founders of our civic club in our neighborhood. They cared about the neighborhood. They weren't in the newspaper, on television. They weren't awards showered on them or whatever. They were just regular, ordinary people who did extraordinary things, just caring about the community. And to put this into some folks, because we're in the South, and so some people can't understand unless you put it in a biblical context. If you think about Nehemiah chapter 2 and how you rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem, Nehemiah surveyed the wall. Nehemiah then said, which are the people, then the people said, let us rebuild. But the important part of that is when the people, you read in there, these people built this part of the gate, but this part of the gate, which means that you can't worry about what's being rebuilt over there if you are not rebuilding the part of the gate right in front of you. And so it's the exact same thing I think we talk about sports. If you're a player, how can you talk about what's happening in society if you don't deal with the league and then you don't deal with the team, then you don't deal with teammates. And so the question is, how do you have an impact? Are you present or do you have presence? And I think what we're lacking enough players who have a level of consciousness where they are informed enough to speak on issues. And then if they don't know, they call somebody first. I can tell you there are players who have said stuff, and I'll call them and say, bro, you know what the hell you're talking about. So before you talk again, call me first before you open your mouth, because you look crazy. Same thing with a lot of entertainers, and I've done that with a lot of different people. And they'll hit me up and they say, hey, Roland, this is going on. What do you think? Should I say this here? Yes, no, and we'll go over that deal. But that has to be in here. If it's not in here, it's not going to happen. And the power of your position also dictates your level of influence. Right. The reason Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job in the NFL is because not enough star players are standing with Colin Kaepernick. Not the dude who on special teams who can get cut. Right. You're not going to cut the guy you paying $80 million.
The headliners, the people
and so,
you can't afford.
Right, and they're scared. How are you scared when you're making $70 million? And half of your contract is guaranteed. We just saw the other day, Chris Long became the first white player to actually stand with a black player when it came to protesting with the national anthem. And so even with that, people are saying, how dare you protest the national anthem? First of all, read the actual national anthem, not just the parts we sing. Read the third stanza.
Yep.
See, and that's part of the problem. Where we stand today in America is that we are operating based upon his story and not history. And as long as you still are repeating his story and you don't actually understand history, then you fall for the okie doke. You can't have somebody say, how dare you protest the national anthem when the First Amendment was put there first for a reason.
And we also talked about backstage Jackie Robinson.
Same thing. In his book, I Never Had It Made, he said why he did not salute the flag or stand for the flag or sing the national anthem. You can't tell me right now when we talk about human rights abuses in China, what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Iraq, when you say nothing about police brutality happening. You can't tell me about what's happening in some other country when a black man in Mississippi was just freed who spent 11 years in prison and he never went to trial. You can't tell me when Khalif Browder went to prison, Rikers Island, for 3 years for allegedly stealing a backpack, and the woman who the backpack was stolen said it wasn't him, but he spent 3 years in Rikers Island, was in solitary confinement, and committed suicide when he got out because of the trauma and how he was beaten and harassed and how he was treated in prison. So when people say, how dare you protest, please don't sit here and try to tell me what kind of American when I need to be if America still does not love me. And people don't understand that because they don't have that level of experience. And I'll leave you with this here to put it in context. In 1979, when they grabbed the American hostages in Iran, y'all remember when they freed the women and children? Guess who also got freed? Black people. I will never forget the image watching Nightline when all the women and children came off the plane. There was a black Marine at the top like, yes, I'm home. What he was really saying is, woo, I'm glad to be a brother. Because folks in other countries know our history and how we have been treated. But we are in denial of that, and so we operate by this whole deal of, well, you know, you shouldn't say anything, you should love America. No, I love America, but as Dr. King said, I'm going to make America be the country he says it should be, not the country it is.
Well, it's... Please. So I'm going to connect two threads here as I move to Hank. One is, it reminds me of a story that Ambassador Andrew Young told, where he said the reason why the movement always met in churches and African American funeral homes was because those were the two most economically independent places.
That's right.
And no one was going to kick the meeting out because they weren't dependent. Nobody had leverage over the owners of those places because the community owned those places.
That's right.
And to your point about economics and freedom working together. Hank, you are my hero. You know that. We've talked about that. I've said that before in many settings. You're a hero to most people in this room. What you did during the Civil Rights Movement, what you endured during the Civil Rights Movement. But what has always struck me about your story, and it relates back to something Roland just said, your grandfather was a Buffalo Soldier, I believe, if I have that correct. Your father was a World War II veteran in segregated units. You were called up to Vietnam. You went and earned 2 Purple Hearts, one of which you're wearing today. Given all that you endured, what did you think when you got your draft notice and was asked by your country to go and to fight?
As you said, my grandfather was in France in World War I, and my father was in the South Pacific in World War II. I'm somewhat of a student of history as well. It was the Army or the Armed Forces that was the point of the spear for human rights and civil rights for African Americans. When President Truman signed the executive order in 1948, he then, and after a few years of adjustment, made it possible for the only organization in this country for black men and women to have careers that was relatively free of racism. Not completely, but relatively free of racism. And the groundwork for that was laid literally in World War II with the Tuskegee Airmen. Their accomplishments against the Germans are legendary. They never lost a bomber. They were escort fighters, and they never lost a bomber to German fighter pilots. The other one was the 92nd Infantry, the Buffalo Soldiers of World War II. In addition to the many medals that they won, they also won 2 Medal of Honors. And the third outfit was 961st Tank Battalion that was attached to George Patterson. They were his lead battalion going into Germany. The Germans by far had the best tank in the war. And the 761st Tank Battalion, they call themselves the Black Panthers. They taught Patton's other soldiers how to fight and defeat that German panzer. It was called shoot and scoot. The German panzer could not outmaneuver the Sherman tank. So they learned how to defeat it that particular way. After the war, and considering the record of black soldiers, the general or the president decided to desegregate the armed forces. And since that time, that is the only, for a long time, outfit that a black man or woman could join and move up through the ranks till you have Colin Powell, who became the youngest chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Today, the armed forces still lead the way. In Korea today, the head of the U.S. Armed Forces in Korea is a black man, a 4-star general.
General Brooks.
Just a few years ago, there are 2 divisions of Marines, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast, and each one of them were headed by a 2-star African-American general. So I am proud of my service. Yeah, there were moments I thought, what am I doing over here when we still have problems in Mississippi where black people can't vote? But slowly, perhaps faster than any other outfit in the country, the Army or the Armed Forces has provided opportunities for African Americans to move to the top. And that is still true today. And incidentally, it is the only branch of service, and that is the Navy, where you have a woman, not just a black woman, but where you have a woman who's a 4-star admiral. And just a few weeks ago, West Point nominated an African-American cadet to be head of the Corps. And usually when you become head of the Corps, captain of the Corps of Cadets, that is one of the sure pathway to generalship. So the Army and the Armed Forces are still providing those particular opportunities. So I am proud of my service. Yes, I had some problems, and I had some problems in Vietnam. And Roland, I'll make you proud. One day, the soldiers hung a Confederate flag in the center of the post. Some of the soldiers came to get me because they knew I had a big mouth. I got my M16. I took 2 magazines, and I went up and I shot that flag down. Later on, the captain sent for me, and the captain was from Mississippi. So when he sent for me, I got my rifle. And I went in to see the captain, and when we looked at each other, we understood each other. And he simply said to me, "Please don't do that again."
They didn't put that flag up again.
No.
I am glad I asked that question because I have never heard that story. So thank you.
I'm going to use that one again.
There you go. The other thing, Hank, that again, sort of moving into the next phase of your life, is that you became a successful businessman, and an owner and operator of restaurants, of hotels, of real estate. I'm very interested in your perspective of what you brought from your activism into your business life. What lessons did you take?
Well, I learned how to make good decisions, and when I met this young lady in a bank, and I decided that through all of the stuff that I'd gone through in the civil rights movement, and I was afraid of nothing, and I wasn't going to be afraid of approaching her. And as the old saying goes, I asked her to throw in with me. And, I understood also, Roland, that without ownership of something,
That's right.
and I am a devotee of Booker T. Washington. I studied Marcus Garvey. Without an ownership of something, and the one area in our lives as black people where we are still falling short of vis-a-vis other minority groups, we still don't own much of anything.
Yep.
Now, the reasons for that historically, there are many reasons for that. Number one, white people fought just as hard to keep us from going into business and staying in the business. But just like we fought so hard to integrate lunch counters and do these other things, we just didn't see the need to fight just as hard to be in business. So when I got the opportunity to buy my first franchise, Dairy Queen franchise, I decided that I am somewhat of a revolutionary as far as black folks are concerned. And I was going to be the very best businessman in this. Make Booker T. Washington proud of me. We needed to be successful in business. And I worked very hard with that. When things were going tough for me, I read about Chinese American grocery store owners and how sometime they would work 60 hours a week to make that little grocery store go. I decided that I was going to work 100 hours per week in my restaurant. It was going to be the cleanest restaurant. I was going to treat my employees the best. And during the time that my wife and I have been in the business, we were known for our employees staying with us a long time. We had managers who had been with us for 30 years, which was almost unheard of. Now, let me give credit where credit is due. My wife is the brains of the business, okay? And so we were of one accord that we wanted to be successful in business. We didn't always get along or agree on everything, but I learned quickly, generally, if I followed her lead, that we were going to do all right.
Let me jump at that. So, again, history, and also I believe in homework. 2 days ago was the 50th anniversary of Dr. King giving his "Where Do We Go From Here" speech at the SLC 10th anniversary convention here in Atlanta. And to Hank's point, because I was actually, it's on my iPod, I was listening to it coming from the airport. And he talked about African Americans moving towards having an economic base and a political base. And I think we have to also, when we talk about putting it in context, remember, this is the 398th year of 20-odd Africans arriving in Virginia in 1619, of August of 1619. So in 2 years, we will commemorate the 400th anniversary Africans first arriving in this country. So you go for 244 years of slavery from 1619 to 1863. Then you have 12 years of Reconstruction. And then you go to, there's a great compromise of 1877 where they remove the federal troops from 3 remaining states in the South. That's how Jim Crow actually begins. Republicans, Democrats cut that deal. Hayes becomes president. Deal's cut. Then you have almost 100 years of Jim Crow. Then you go through that long period, then 13 years of black freedom movement, some call civil rights movement. King gets killed in 68. Nixon gets elected in 69. Arthur Fletcher from Nebraska comes in. So your first wave of African Americans goes to the corporate American 1970, 1971. So if you use 1970 as the marker when African Americans have been technically fully free Americans, we're talking 47 years. I was born in 68, which means I was born into an America where I was not a fully free American. I don't have children. I have 3 sisters, 1 brother, which means that my nieces and nephews are the first generation of African Americans born fully free. You have to understand that context to then understand whether it's lack of ownership, whether it's lack of full voting rights, whether it's where you sit when it comes to health disparities, where you talk about when it comes to income levels. And so that puts it in the context because literally black folks were frozen out of nearly every single lever. And not only that, to study American history, where you always have had black success in America has always been followed by white backlash. 12 years of Reconstruction, black freedom movement, busing, desegregation, white flight leaving cities. 1980s, you see an advancement of black folks in cities like Detroit, Atlanta, Maynard Jackson, Coleman Young, Marion Barry. Reagan gets elected in 1980, fall back, 8 years of Obama, now you have Trump. No. But understand, American history, black success, followed by white backlash. And so to understand that, now you begin to see where we are. So yeah, $1.1 trillion spending power, but you got 2.6 million black-owned businesses, 2.5 million have 0 employees, just to one particular person. Those black companies, the 2.5 million, have an average revenue of $78,000. That means if you are generating $80,000 in revenue as a black-owned business, you are actually in the top 1%. You're in the top % of black-owned businesses. So that puts into context why you also have the same problems, because if you don't own, then you can't control. And like I was telling Cito backstage, when I had a little issue with executive producer at CNN, and he was very paternalistic. I said, let me explain something to you. I have 5 revenue streams. Y'all number 3. I said, so if you say anything to me and y'all decide to get rid of me, well then I'm just gonna turn left and keep moving because I got 4 other revenue streams. I wanted him to understand you don't own me. And so when you own, you have power, you have leverage. And yes, as long as we are still an employee and not an employer, then we're still begging for somebody else. So when Wade Phillips of the Houston Texans coaching then saw my nephew Chris and said, Chris, what position do you want to play? I said, no. I said, Wade, we ain't raising him to be a linebacker. We raising him to be an owner.
And let me move to Alexis because I want to bring you in on this conversation. But as I do, I want to note there was a convention of the National Association of Black McDonald Owner Operators here a few years ago. And I happened to welcome them, and I asked them how many of you were a part of the civil rights movement. And about 75% of the hands in the room went up. And Hank's story is a very interesting one. So many people who came out of that activism became owners because I think they knew this very well and it was known within the movement. Alexis, what should businesses be doing right now to create more ownership for the economically disadvantaged?
Well, that's a that's a long question in terms of
Short question, long answer.
yeah. But the reality is, let me just go back to the notion, first of all, of ownership. I don't think this is an issue for businesses alone, okay? We've got a mindset issue in this country, okay? We first have to start talking about, this history and this reality. The notion that somehow businesses can just step up and make a difference, it's not real. You talk about what Andy said about funeral homes and where we met. My daddy was one of those in Mobile, Alabama, as Hank knows, okay? And we still don't have those gathering places where we can have the kind of candid conversations about how we advance the question of ownership. And then where does business, where does government, where does it, but it's got to start with us too. And it's got to start with this country understanding, that ours is just the beginning, because we do take 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, and then 5 steps back. That has been our history. So, I've been on this playing field a long time. I have to tell you, one of my greatest frustrations now is we will have great entrepreneurial initiatives, and I'm all for what David Patterson did in New York to get Wall Street investing in more minority businesses. In all of my companies, you can't give out a contract unless, I'm clear about what's the participation rate of what we're doing to advance it. But that is just such a small part of it. The reality is we've got to start with a mindset change in the country of understanding the economic barriers and the realities of what we have faced as a people. And that's just not happening. We don't want to hear the story.
That's where the phrase "when you don't know, you don't know" comes in.
That's right.
Because if you don't know,
that's right. They don't want to hear the story. And so for me, we've got to have truly a national, organized effort if we are ever going to crack the so-called story of what economic ownership and empowerment looks like. I love Hank. I love his story. And we can go around this room and say there are not many Hanks in this world. And we spend too much time talking about these individual stories and not enough about the man who shot the Confederate flag and the barriers. Seriously, the barriers of what it took to get there. And unless we are willing to talk about the barriers as a part of the mindset change, sure, I can sit here and talk about great initiatives from business. But for me, it's just piecemeal work still.
It's also why black media matters, because you have to have the space to share the information. You have to have people hearing, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
That's right.
Now I know I can do that?
Yeah. And they don't understand that.
I mean, I just want, look, my cameras are here. I have the only television show in America that's national that's targeted to African Americans. Only one. Not on BET, not on Aspire, that's daily. And so this is going to be on. People are going to say, well, I didn't realize I could do that. And so black newspapers were that source for the longest. Well, all of a sudden people say I can get it elsewhere. So how are you moving people to get them to understand that? And it is mindset. When I was at Stevie Wonder's radio station in LA, a woman said, oh, that's a picture of my son. I called him the first rounder. I said, no, baby, no. Call him the owner. Raise your son not to be a first rounder, but to be an owner. She said, she literally gasped. She said, no one had ever told me to think of raising my son to own the Lakers instead of playing for the Lakers.
And let me just interrupt you, Roland, because I want to answer your question.
Okay.
I want to say 3 things. All right. So takeaways. I'm a big believer that you got to give folks some takeaways, okay? Okay, so, yeah, business have to lay out their program, their initiative, and they have to be committed to the concept of ownership for people of color and for women in this country. That's what they have to do. And they have to have strategies and programs to promote that. But then, number two, they've got to go a step farther now. It's not just enough to stay in your own backyard in your own company. You've got to work with elected leadership who want to make a difference in whole communities and whole cities. You take Atlanta, of how the business community has tried to partner with the mayors of this city. Atlanta really is a model in many ways. Yes. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a model, in my view, that other businesses need to adopt, not run away from the political structure, not run away from what it takes to empower voters in a community, but figure out the Atlanta model. If we could do more of what we did in Atlanta with the business partnership, yeah, it makes a difference. Yep. Okay? Yep. And then the third thing that I would say, in terms of what businesses can do what they have done in these last 3 days that I'm very proud of. Businesses can begin to speak out even more on the social value and social proposition of this country. Yep. And to realize it's not just up to the government to create the climate.
Hank Thomas?
Yeah. When I speak to groups for high school and colleges in the past 3 years, I take a somewhat different view of our situation today. The purpose of our civil rights movement was to remove the barriers that kept African Americans from moving into the middle class. And those were barriers of education, training, job opportunities. A lot of those barriers, I do say, have been removed. Mm-hmm. And today, African Americans are a middle class people. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I dare say that probably 95% of you are in the middle class. You're in the middle class because you took advantage of educational opportunities. Mm-hmm. We've got you at Howard, at Hampton, and we have you at Harvard. I have gone to the military academies, and last couple of years I've been up to West Point, and it just did my heart so much goodness to see those African American young ladies who are at West Point. And then for 2 years, my wife and I have hosted students from West Point at our home. This year, 6 of the students were young African Americans. So they are at the academies, they're at MIT, they're at Princeton, they're at Harvard, they're at Stanford. So the key to getting into the middle class is to take advantage of those opportunities that old foot soldiers like myself have provided. Mm-hmm. The way African Americans will continue to advance, Donald Trump notwithstanding, is to continue to get education and to get training. Today you get that training, and certainly at the mid-level there is very little racial discrimination because American businesses have committed themselves to hiring the best possible people. You can live anywhere you want to live. And certainly in cities, there are very few cities like Atlanta, but when we look at Atlanta, this is the 4th successive black mayor, and what a tremendous job Kasim Reed is doing. Today, and I say this without any hesitation, 2017, for African Americans, for black immigrants, there is no other place that gives the opportunity like this country gives. You just got to step forth, take advantage of you, and many of you in this room have done that. You have gone to school, you've gone to post-high school education. So I don't dwell on what has happened in Charlottesville, but one thing I do notice about Charlottesville, I noticed the number of white people of goodwill who've stepped forward. 50% of all of the Freedom Riders 56 years ago were white. So we have a reservoir of white people in this country who still want to make this country not great, but greater. So this is a great country today.
The sad news is that I have to wrap up this panel. The good news is that I know that all four of these people can be found at any moment on your computer, giving an oral history, doing a television show, talking about these issues. They are all, as you have seen, champions for justice in very significant ways, and I want us all to congratulate them again for everything that they've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To each of our honorees, you have just been magnificent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please know how much we value all of the information that was imparted here today. Please know that at some point, some of our young people and some of those who may be as old as I am will give serious thought to what you have said here today. And we can certainly take something away of real value that you have said that will help to make our society a little better place in which to live. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say a special thank you to you, Doug. We allowed you to sit in the middle and ask the questions. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon and attending the Hank Aaron Champion for Justice Award ceremony presented by Delta Airlines. I don't know if the CEO is here, but we referenced him. Ed Bastian, let the word go forth that we appreciate all that you are doing to enhance opportunities for all of us at Delta Airlines. Thank you for joining us. As we end our program, we ask that you remain seated, please, so the media can come forward to take pictures of our guest. We hope, shall I say, we know we'll see you all at the game tonight as the Braves take on the Cincinnati Reds at 7:30. And we hope that you will have a safe ride home and a safe ride to the game this evening. Thank you so very, very much. Good evening.